PowerPoint. Got it. Perfect. So this is being recorded, and yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Kathy Tollison. I'm the District Manager for Associated General Contractors of Utah in the St. George office. And we also have Taylor Smith, Director of Safety and Education. He is running our IT in the background, helping out with any glitches and things like that. And he is in our Salt Lake office and handling our tech today, so we appreciate him. Just a little information for you. AGC was a participant in making this legislation happen for House Bill 555. And if you didn't know, we have a great team of folks working on Utah's Capitol Hill. Our legislative committee chair, Scott DeGraffenreid, and the entire legislative committee works hard and long during that legislative session. Joey Gilbert, our president and CEO of AGC of Utah, he extends his regrets for not being able to be here today. He is actually in Washington, D.C. today, meeting with Congressman Owens to help Utah contractors with the workforce development efforts, which is a big concern, as we all know. Congressman Owens is the subcommittee chair on higher education and workforce development with jurisdiction over the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, apprenticeship programs, and more. And so we're heavily involved in all of those concerns. So that's where he's at today, but wishes he could be here and excited for this event to take place, as well as Taylor and I are very excited to be able to offer this to you today. And we've got a great lineup of folks here to share information and help you understand HB 555 and how you might be able to implement that in your company. First up, we are going to have Rochelle Ackley with Talent Ready, and she is the program director for Talent Ready Utah with the Utah System of Higher Education. And she's going to give us information on why work-based learning is becoming an increasingly important tool for workforce development and the reasons behind the changes in HB 555. So with that, we are going to turn the time over to Rochelle till about 12:50.
All right, I hope you can hear me. Okay, Kathy's shaking her head. Yes, thank you so much, Kathy and AGC, for allowing us the opportunity from Talent Ready Utah to jump on and participate in this webinar. As a way of reintroduction, my name is Rochelle Ackley, Program Director for Talent Ready Utah. I have the privilege of overseeing most of our K-12 initiatives, which include work-based learning partnerships between industry and education. Just a quick overview of what I hope to cover in the short time that I'm here with you today. Again, the reason why behind House Bill 555, but also an introduction to who Talent Ready Utah is for those of you who may not be familiar with our efforts and the impact that we have throughout the state. Talent Ready Utah, we were created in 2018 in the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity to be an industry-facing agency for the purpose of workforce development. So our main role really is to represent the voice of industry in terms of policy and legislation to ensure that your workforce needs are being met. We got our start way back in 2015 when the Utah Aerospace Pathways Program was created. This program was created as a result of a challenge that the Boeing company had given to Utah. There was a huge gap in workforce that was anticipated, specifically in composites manufacturing within aerospace and defense. And the Boeing company, along with several other dominant aerospace and industry defense companies throughout the state, challenged the state to really come up with a solution that would help prepare qualified talent for those roles to minimize that gap. And so with that, the Utah Aerospace Pathways Program was created. And what it is really is a pathway for high school students to take coursework that's complementary to the skill sets that industry partners are in need of, and gives these students an opportunity to explore careers within aerospace and defense through what we call an externship, which essentially is an after-school hour internship. Through this experience, students have the opportunity to explore and discover their interest in aerospace and connect to career pathways and continued education opportunities. The program also served as a tool for workforce for the industry partners that were supporting the program, as they were able to connect with all of these students that were participating in the program and find qualified talent and offer them or extend them job opportunities within their companies. So the Utah Aerospace Pathways program was really foundational to allowing Talent Ready to grow into what it is today. In 2018, we were statutorily created as a center in the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, and today we're now housed in the Utah system of higher education, where we continue our role in aligning education and industry to close workforce gaps. We are governed by the Talent Education Industry and Alignment Board. We have direct reporting lines to the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission that's chaired by Governor Cox. Our board helps to direct us to ensure we're directionally correct when we're looking at which and what workforce needs we're addressing. And the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission is a space where we can bring policy recommendations to the governor that will impact workforce development throughout the state. So it's really influential and critical to the infrastructure of workforce development. With that being said, House Bill 555 was one of those policy recommendations that were brought to the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. In 2019, Talent Ready Utah partnered with Stadler Rel to launch what we call the Talent Ready Apprenticeship Connection Program. Essentially, it's a youth apprenticeship program that's adopted from the Swiss model of apprenticeship and really gives youth an opportunity to begin an apprenticeship while they're still in high school, splitting their time between the classroom and the workplace. As many of you know, as employers, finding talent is becoming increasingly difficult in an environment where we have such a low unemployment rate. And we're finding that a very valuable way to help build your talent pipeline is by providing high school students or youth opportunities to start learning and gaining work experience as they're going through school, coupling both classroom learning with on-the-job learning to really develop a talent pool and pipeline for the talent that you're needing. As we launched the Talent Ready Apprenticeship Connection Program and have since worked with employers to develop additional youth apprenticeship programs, we've been finding feedback or hearing feedback from employers around the challenges in hiring minors. And so as we've heard more about around this gap, Talent Ready Utah worked really closely with Representative Moss and Senator Milner. Representative Moss sits on the Talent Education and Industry Alignment Board. He's a board member, and Senator Milner is actually our chair. And so with them and drafting attorneys, Talent Ready Utah wrote the legislation for House Bill 555. It took about 3 weeks to write the language for the bill. And what the bill does is it changes legislation around liability and workers' compensation coverages for students who are participating in paid educational training programs. Prior to changing the legislation, students could participate in an unpaid educational training program under the age of 18, and they would be covered by state risk management for liability while remaining covered by the district's workers' compensation policies. When a student moves from unpaid to paid, that's where things become a little bit complicated for employers. And this is the feedback that we were hearing that was causing challenges for employers to really engage in this space. And so House Bill 555 changes that. So students who are enrolled in an educational training program and receiving compensation are still covered for liability under state risk management and also covered for workers' compensation medical by the district. In a little bit, we'll hear from Sandra Hemmer from Granite School District, who is a large player in helping us really refine the language for House Bill 555 and will provide a lot of important feedback as to how an employer can implement that bill language and how it really works on the ground. We had several people who were contributors to House Bill 555. As we finished and wrapped up writing the bill language, we had associations like Associated General Contractors and the Utah Manufacturers Association, who did a lot up on the Hill to help promote and lobby for the bill. We have partnered very closely with Melissa Stark, the Commissioner of Apprenticeships housed in the Department of Workforce Services, who provided valuable feedback, as well as, like I mentioned, Sandy Hemmert from Granite School District. So we're super appreciative of all of the partners who played in this space to making this happen. Just want to thank them for their contributions. And we hope that House Bill 555 continues to help provide the space for employers to actively engage in offering youth apprenticeship programs. And as Talent Ready Utah continues to engage with employers to better understand the workforce needs of the state, this is an opportunity for us to make similar legislative changes that would impact workforce development. So with that, I'll turn the time back over to you, Kathy, if there's any questions.
All right, we're going to open it up. If anyone has any questions for Rochelle, you can ask that now. And I forgot to mention, if you did have questions along the way while the speaker is presenting, go ahead and put that in the Q&A or in the chat box, and we'll be checking that, or raise your hand, or do something like that. So are there any questions at this time? Taylor, have you seen any come through?
No, we do not.
Okay. All right. Well, again, if you have any, go ahead and let us know at some point, and we will get those answered. We're going to go ahead and introduce our next presenter. And thank you, Rochelle, so much for that background and that history. Sure appreciated that information and all the work that you do. So we're going to hear from Robert Jensen. He's an attorney in St. George for RJ Law, specializing in construction law, and he will provide us a legal perspective and ramifications on HB 555. So with that, we'll turn it over to Mr. Robert Jensen.
Awesome. Can I share my screen and do a PowerPoint?
Oh, Taylor?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yep.
All right. Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so
Oh, real quick, Robert, hit on
Yeah.
display settings, change it to right up there at the top where it says display settings. Yep.
Yeah.
Click on that and then duplicate slideshow.
better? Oh,
1 second. There you go.
beautiful. Okay, House Bill 555. Let me just kind of summarize for you what I found, what I liked about this. First of all, I'm impressed with Rochelle Ackley. That was a beautiful summary and a great presentation with a ton of background and history. I don't know Jefferson Moss or Ann Milner, but I appreciate this bill, and the more that I've looked at it, the more that I've studied it, the more impressed I am. As I went through the House Bill 555, as I went through the whole thing, there was one word to me that stood out bigger than all the others. There was a phrase somewhere that said education and industry alignment. I love the idea. I think it's compelling. There was another phrase that talked about classroom instruction, work experience. And I think for most of our trade partners who might be on here, there's another phrase, exclusive remedy. I think there's some compelling and significant legal issues in House Bill 555. But what I thought personally to me that was most important was the word that pops up, mentors. And I look back on my life when I was in high school. I grew up, my dad was a general contractor, and I worked all summer long. I thought building houses and doing magnificent things. And as I went back to school, I felt important. I felt like I had a skill. I felt like I was smart. It gave me abilities. And I think more than anything, it motivated me. And I think as I look at House Bill 55, that is what I think is important. And I think right now, in a time where we're dealing with youth and the challenges that they're facing, there's nothing more important than mentors right now. And I love the idea of the industry being partners with the education and making education all the more powerful and all the more exciting. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the video, the music video Millennials. If you haven't, this is your homework. You need to go get online and look up Millennials. And there's this, I forget his name, Micah Tyler, I think, who sings 4-part harmony with himself and talks about this group of youth that are traveling through time, and they live in their parents' basements, and they have these incredible provisions or visions of being millionaires by the time they're 30, but they still don't have a job. And I think this bill helps to give our youth direction in a powerful way, and in a way that helps and serves the construction industry. So that's my philosophical approach to the bill. But what you want to hear about is that this bill affects 3 different programs. The first one is the apprenticeship program and the youth apprenticeship. And then there are 2 internship programs, public education and higher education. And the bill doesn't create any of these, but it furthers them. Let me just tell you what I learned, and I'll be really fast. The first one is the apprenticeships. This is under the Workforce Services Code. It establishes a paid work experience with classroom instruction, at least 144 hours. And it provides skills that result in nationally recognized, you either get a license, a certification, or credentials. You get something out of it that will advance your standing in the construction industry in the state of Utah, or otherwise throughout the nation. And all of that is at no charge. It's a great program, and it's a great springboard into the construction industry. Then the second is the youth apprenticeships, and that's classroom instruction combined with work experience. It doesn't give you a license. It doesn't require 144 hours. But what it does is it gives these youth a path to have more decisions, more understanding as they make decisions regarding college or regarding employment. The second program is higher education and high school internships. And as you read through House Bill 555, it goes back and forth, kind of rotating back and forth through these 3 bills, these 3 chapters in the code. So the first thing that it does is what Rochelle pointed out, and maybe this is the primary issue of the code, of the bill, is that it offers legal protection. Number one, it makes sure that all of these youth, whether they're, as Rochelle pointed out, whether they're paid or not paid, that they are covered with workers' compensation. And number 2, that they would be covered under the state's risk management fund. And then what our trade partners want the most is to make sure that that is supposed to be their exclusive remedy. So if you're doing a good turn, you're helping some youth perhaps, and by the changes that have been made to through House Bill 555, the idea is that if one of them were to get hurt, that they would be completely taken care of. And the workers' comp and the state risk management fund are to be the exclusive remedies protecting the institution, either the high school or the university, and also protecting the employer. So, I mean, that's a significant thing. Also, as you read through, so there's a section on this in each one of those three statutes. That's why House Bill 555 is as long as it is, because it repeats this legal protection for each one of those chapters. Next thing I think that's important is that it defines the cooperating employer. And really, this cooperating employer is the mentor for these youth in a powerful way. Not just helping them to have a good trade basis, but helping them in life, helping them through their struggles. And, you know, I've got to say that through high school, through my undergraduate, even through my postgraduate work, I was always working in the construction industry. And I look back on co-employees and my bosses. They had a huge role in my life and my motivation and moving forward. So I would just say you can change lives 1,000 ways through these opportunities. And I was just going to note that a couple of weeks ago down here in Southern Utah, BYU Management and BYU Law Society teamed up. They had a very, very successful individual come and speak to our group. And that's what they talked about, was the mentors. He talked about the mentors that had made a difference in his life. So second under cooperating employer is the classroom training. And here you're going to have help from the high schools, from the universities, give training, but you have got to also help on the job training. So it's not classroom so much, but you will be expected to help them be safe. This is an opportunity for you to get some goodwill, and hopefully the community sees what your company is doing and giving these internships. But let me just point out that you need to teach them the obvious. And frankly, half of your crew, you need to reteach them the obvious as well. You've got to constantly be reminding and teaching our people to keep this top of mind, to be careful and safe. And having your team help train and teach these interns, apprentices, is going to be a great thing for your team. The next thing is, I'm going the wrong way. The next thing is that you're going to be giving them work experience. And I just, again, would remind you, even though you've got workers' comp, even though you've got the help from the state to be an exclusive remedy and make sure that you're not financially responsible for any injury, you need to remember that these are young workers. They don't have the kind of experience that your crew does. They're young and they're new. You've all heard the song. Actually, I hope maybe you haven't, but our youth are constantly listening to a song, and it's flat out called Young and Dumb, and they celebrate it. And you know, the construction site is not the place to be celebrating that. So I'm impressed with House Bill 55. I think it's doing great things. I think it's there to protect you. You should not be concerned that you're going to have liability as a result of you helping these apprentices or helping these young interns. It's a great opportunity for you, and hopefully you get new employees out of it. Hopefully it raises up a new generation of employees who love to build. I mean, so much that is what Utah is about, and especially that's what Southern Utah is about. So congratulations to Rochelle and everybody who helped to put the House Bill 555 together. I think it's a great benefit. I think it's a benefit to the industry. It's a benefit to the state, and no doubt it's a benefit to the youth. So.
All right, thank you, Robert. Robert, if I would recommend to anyone, he knows the construction line inside and out, and great advocate for the industry. I've got a couple questions, and I'll just open it up to all the panelists. This first question is from Jake Hinckley. He wants to know if this will cover WBL programs or apprenticeship programs as well. And did that answer your question, Jake, Robert's information, or does someone else have some more that they could add to that? Any of our panelists could answer.
What's WDL?
I'm going to say work-based learning. Is that correct, Jake?
Is it WBL?
B as in boy.
B. I think that's what it is.
Robert, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it is intended to cover work-based learning programs, including internships and apprenticeships, both youth and adults. So the answer I would say is yes. In the past, just to add to that, we haven't been able to compensate students for internships because of the liability and workers' comp challenges when going from unpaid to paid. And so this will allow for employers to participate in internships within that high school space and pay them, the students.
Perfect. Does anyone else have anything to add? Okay. This is from Bones Levitt. And this question is, would the student be locked into dealing with one cooperating employer, or would there be a possibility for students to have multiple opportunities with multiple companies? Who's got an answer to that?
I can make one up. I think the statute's open. If you can find an employer who will let you be an intern, you know, I'm sure there's rules, and you might have to work through Rochelle. But I think it's encouraging it, and in fact, the department is supposed to be looking for these kinds of relationships. So if we can, you know, through the home builders associations, through AGC, through any channel, if we can find employers that are interested, we should encourage them. And if a youth or an adult, for that matter, has people in their neighborhood that they know, I think the program would welcome the initiation of those kinds of connections.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Kathy, just to add to that, and I might call on Mike Hassler, who will speak in a little bit, but I do think that, you know, it shouldn't limit the number of employers that a student is interested in doing an internship with or an apprenticeship with. Mike could probably speak better to the process in helping to connect a student to a particular employer, but it should be open and allow students more opportunities.
Perfect. Yes, I think Mike will be speaking to that. Well, we are going to move on, unless Mike, you're there. I'm not sure if you're there or not. Let's see, come on. But we're going to move on to our next presenter. And Floyd Johnson is the Division Director of Utah Occupational Safety and Health, UOSH, and Utah Labor Commission. And Mr. Johnson will speak on the OSHA compliance side of hiring 16 to 18-year-old students and what companies need to be aware of as they do so. So with that, we'll welcome Floyd Johnson.
I appreciate that. It's good to be here. I like this program for a number of reasons. This is a great way for young people to be able to get out there and get some. The biggest complaint I've heard from young workers is they want me to have experience, but they won't give it to me or give me an opportunity to have that experience. So how do I do that? And I think part of the reason why that is the case is because of some of the rules and things that have been in place to this point that frankly employers are a little worried about getting themselves involved in, because it can get a little gray in some areas. I guess the best way to handle this is to understand Chapter 23 of the Employment of Minors in Utah Code. If employers want to know what is important, it's going to be in there. I'm going to just highlight a couple of sections in here, and hopefully this will help at least spur some questions. It'll be more direct in this discussion. So right off the bat, it says, it is a policy of the state of Utah to encourage the growth and development of minors through providing opportunities for work and for related work learning experiences, while at the same time adopting reasonable safeguards for their health, safety, and education. So clearly that last line is something that I'm interested in. We do want our youth or our young people to be able to get out there and get some work and experience under their belts, but we all want to make sure that they're safe while they're doing it. One of the concerns that I have, and this is maybe just more personal than it is anything else, but that is and I think Robert talked about this a little bit, but most of the time, young people and even older people with experience don't know what they don't know. And that's the problem, is they're not sure what they should be asking about. They're not sure what is or isn't okay. Some people may not even know that there are laws that protect them from practices by employers that may not be that great. So a healthy education in advance to knowing what those rules are, to knowing what those I guess options are to them, I think would be very, very beneficial. So these CTE programs and those programs that are touching the high schools and things, I hope they're getting at least some of that while they're in there. And I'm assuming that they do. I haven't looked in it too far. Sorry, was there a question? Okay. Another one of the things that stood out to me and should be of interest to our employees, especially in construction. We all know that there is a rule for minors working in construction or fields that could be considered hazardous. And that's been kind of a loose term, the hazardous portion of it. But there are things in places you can go to kind of figure out what is hazardous and what is considered hazardous. Now, interestingly enough, basically anything in construction is hazardous for the most part. So that's why these provisions that have been made in HB 555 are actually really, really important. I'm just going to list a couple, like power-driven woodworking machines. Yes, that happens in construction. Power-driven metal forming, punching, and shearing machines. That's happening in construction. Balers, compactors, paper product machines, maybe not so much in construction, but definitely out there. Power-driven circular saws, band saws, we get it. These power saws, these power tools, these things are the kind of things that cause those hazards to happen. And then, and this one's kind of the near and dear to my heart, is the roofing operations. You know, you get a lot of times you'll get these family-owned companies that do roofing. And just in my experience, I've been out there before and pulled some people off roofs, and there's a young kid and there's his dad. His dad owns the company and the kid's up on the roof with no fire protection on. You know, and that's, to me, that is kind of perpetuating the problem. If anything, you'd want to make sure that your son is protected, I would think. But, and then you would want that to be taught across the board. So knowing some of these hazardous operations, I'm just going to read from the chapter 23 here that kind of talks about these things and how we can work through those. Let's see. Occupation of minors. A minor may not be employed or permitted to work in any hazardous occupation except as authorized by the division in writing when the minor is under careful supervision in connection with or following completion of an apprentice program, vocational training or rehabilitation program as approved by the division. Now, there are couple other exceptions, and that has to do more with, I think, family, the organization of the family, what's going on at home. Some families have situations where their young kids have to work just to support the family as head of household or things like that. And those ones are a little different. But as it said in the thing here in the paragraph, that as long as they're under an apprenticeship program, they can be taught and trained how to use these pieces of machinery or equipment, as long as they're being supervised well. One thing that I was wondering, and maybe somebody can answer this for me, was if there was a vetting process for some of the companies that will be working along with or directly with this program, so that we know that they're being trained and supervised thoroughly. Again, there are some exceptions to the rule. I'll list a couple of them just because I'm sure the people will be wondering. But has received a high school diploma, if they're still younger than 18, has received school release certificate. That would be something that they would have to work with their school, and it would probably be this apprenticeship program that they would have to have the documentation for. If they're legally married, that exempts them. And again, head of household in situations where home life might be a little rough. Now, when it comes directly to the UOSH portion of this, the director of the division or the director's designee shall have authority to enter and inspect any place or establishment covered by this chapter and to have access to such records as may aid in the enforcement of this chapter. The division may investigate any complaint under this chapter and may commence an administrative proceeding with a penalty of up to $500 per violation. Basically, it's just saying that we as the regulatory arm of this still have the obligation and the duty to go in and inspect these companies and do it, keeping these things in mind. We have always tried to pay attention to, if there are minors around, try to get some information regarding that and make sure that those individuals are being protected. In terms of what I was kind of asked to speak about, that kind of covers what I was being asked to talk about. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Something that's more direct, I think, would be helpful.
Okay, I've got a few more questions. Somebody asked where we can get a copy of the bill so they can send it to HR and legal. And is there a condensed version of the bill that would work? I know the bill can be found online if you just do a Google search, and I think it's on Talent Ready Utah's website as well. So is there a condensed version of this bill? Does anyone know?
I'm not sure if it's condensed.
Okay.
Kathy, can we just send it out to everybody who registered for this as well?
Yep, we can certainly do that. So absolutely get that, because I've looked at online several times. So we can certainly get that sent out. And then looks like JD's typing an answer to that as well. And then Bones has another question. Does this mean that we are going to have to start labeling heavy machinery as 18 plus only? He references grocery store compactors are all signs stating operators must be 18 years of age or older. So Floyd, is that something that they're going to have to start doing?
At this point, they're not required to put any signage up. I think it's a good way to remind people, but what's more important is they're going to have in their training program specified the types of equipment that they would need to be approved to work on. If they would like to add signage to that, that's fantastic. It's helpful, but it's not a requirement at this point.
Okay. And then Melissa has provided a resource that shows the regulations provide a limited exemption. Anyway, Taylor, can everyone see the Q&As in there and have access?
No, I'll send these links in the chat.
Okay, we'll send these links in the chat. Thank you, Melissa, for that information as well. Do you want to comment on that?
Of course.
Was Melissa able to
I'm
comment?
here. Sorry, I was looking for to connect to the unmute.
Oh.
My apologies for that. So for those that don't know me, I'm the Commissioner of Apprenticeship Programs for the state of Utah. And I'm sorry I'm not on video today. I'm having bandwidth issues. So, but I'm happy to help facilitate. And I really appreciated Floyd's questions about how do we know? How do we know that the safety is being taken seriously? And these programs, when you register your program with the Department of Labor as a registered apprenticeship, there is a vetting process. And they have some mandates on mentor to apprentice ratios. And they have very good documentation as to what needs to be done ahead of time, what needs to be done while they're working, and which includes, you know, anything that they may need. And so that's something that we can help facilitate. And then I know when Sandy and Michael talk, they will talk about the student learner agreements and the safety agreements that the students have to sign. Now, all of these things are agreements that both the employer and the student signs, and if they're underage, their parents also sign. So they're agreeing and that they're going to participate in this program. There's going to be skills training, technical skills training, but that the safety and the mentoring will be a part of it. And then I'll give another link in the chat for you to sign up for our apprenticeship newsletter. It's going to come out tomorrow, and the whole thing is about mentoring. Because the key to your program and having a good program is having a successful mentor and mentee relationship. And so we provide some resources as a part of that. And I know when Sandy and Michael speak, they'll have more to add as well.
Oh, that's perfect. Everybody sign up for that apprenticeship newsletter coming out tomorrow. That's great. So watch for that in the chat, and then we can also send that out too as well, Taylor, if make a note of that. So thank you so much, Floyd, for that information, and Melissa for contributing there as well, answering some questions. I think we've got them all. Oh, let me check. I think we've got them all answered for now. All right. We're going to go ahead and go on to our next presenters. Rainey McBride, JD Ashby, and Kurt Hoskins from WCF. And so they're going to talk about workers' compensation claims and all the ins and outs of that. And we'll start with Rainey, and then she will give some information and then introduce JD and Kurt.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So like Kathy said, I'm Rainey McBride. I'm with WCF Insurance, and I oversee the workers' compensation claims in Utah. I work with the claims managers and the claims adjusters on the workers' comp side. And then I'd like to introduce my coworkers, my colleagues, JD Ashby and Kurt Hoskin. So JD is our VP of claims in all states. He's over all states, and Kurt's one of our claims managers for the workers' comp claims. JD is one of our attorneys who spent several years here in our legal department and also in HR. He spent several years in HR and before coming over to claims. So, and then Kurt serves as our claims manager for our public employers group. So he's working with the state of Utah account and other municipalities and colleges and universities. So he's really well versed in the volunteer statute that already exists that provides benefits for government interns and volunteers. And then I would just like maybe to get some comments from Kurt and JD, and then we could open it up for discussion and questions regarding how the workers' comp is impacted by this bill. So JD and Kurt, do you want to speak a little bit?
Sure. I think this is how we work. It takes three of us to do it. So I may be volleying to Kurt a little bit, but this bill is interesting. I really appreciate everything that Rochelle and Robert and Floyd have already mentioned. I think it's potentially very economically impactful and impactful for these young people who have opportunities they didn't have before, and for employers who can only do so much when they can't pay those apprentices. And this opens up some doors that didn't exist before. As far as I know, and Kurt, you'll know if this is any different for us, but this hasn't been tested yet in our world. We haven't received any claims yet from an apprentice under this program.
Not that I'm aware of.
I thought it was interesting that among the different sections of the Utah Code that this modifies, the Workers' Comp Act and the Occupational Disease Act were not on that list. And so it made no modifications to the Utah Workers' Comp Act. And so there could be a time at some point where somebody tests or challenges that exclusive remedy provision, because now there are two exclusive remedy provisions. There's the one in the Work Comp Act, and then there's the one here. But by providing that access to the risk management fund and to medical benefits under work comp, it does take that liability that would have been at kind of top of mind for any contractor or anyone thinking of participating in one of these programs, and shifts it to the sponsoring school district or whoever the sponsoring entity is. And so that, to kind of echo some of the things that Floyd said, to me, it just puts a great emphasis on safety. Robert touched on the population that we're working with. You may want to have your safety hackles up just a little bit more. And then the process of reporting claims is going to be potentially a little bit different if you have an apprentice who is injured on the job, and typically you would be reporting that claim for one of your employees yourself, and now you'll need to cooperate as best you can with the sponsoring entity to make sure that the best and quickest information gets reported to us or to whoever your work comp carrier is, so that they can process that claim and be processed a little differently, where they don't have access to indemnity benefits, to lost time benefits, but still due to the medical benefits. And obviously our motivation is always to help people recover and return to work as quickly as possible. And so the better the programs that you set up within these apprenticeships and internships, to make sure you have the infrastructure to report claims as quickly as you otherwise would, and just cooperate with the sponsoring entity to be streamlined in that process, the better everything's going to flow if you do have injuries from this population. Anything you would add procedurally, Kurt, to that?
Yeah, we actually just had an example the other day where of an employer who happened to be the state of Utah, where they actually filed a claim on behalf of an intern. The intern was benefiting the state of Utah, but the cooperating employer happened to be one of the major public universities. And so we transferred that claim over to that university, so that it wasn't on the list of the state of the Utah as the receiving end of that. And so, yeah, it's something we look at on a regular basis when we get an intern type claim or a government volunteer type claim in, is to make sure that it goes goes to the right place so that it's reported correctly. But we do have several intern type injury claims every year with what we do in my group. So that's the procedures to make sure it goes to that sponsor, not the contributing or the cooperating employer, but to the public institution or private institution for that matter.
Yeah, and I can't speak for other carriers, but I know with us, we really hone in on the fact when we get an injured worker who is underage or who is a high school, right? Our adjusters are very sensitive to that. They're talking to the parents, they're making sure all those privacy issues are in place and so forth. So that's one thing that we need to be keyed into as well.
And as our, pervading message is be careful out there, and go back to some of the points that Floyd hit on, which is that if you imagine now this high school student who's learning a trade and working with, learning to work with equipment that's potentially hazardous, and we see heartbreaking claims every day where just one little thing goes wrong and somebody loses a limb or loses their life. And that you think of that happening when somebody's still in high school and doesn't even have a career path yet, and is just trying to put their first feet on it. That's about as tragic an outcome as there can be. And so the more emphasis we can put on making these as safe as possible, the better all our outcomes are going to be, and the less we're going to worry about work comp. Hopefully you'll never have to meet any of us as part of these programs, because we hope the workplaces are as safe as they can possibly be. But this certainly is, as Rochelle pointed out at the beginning, there was kind of this roadblock when it came to paying, paid versus unpaid programs like this. And this definitely removes that roadblock and hopefully opens up some opportunities and gets more people both interested and capable in the construction trades early, because that it's certainly an unmet need in our state, and it's something that anything we can do to help, we're part of. I don't know. I think everything else I had on my bullet pointed list here, either Rochelle or Robert or Floyd already covered. So I don't know if people have specific questions to work comp. We're happy to field them, but we will wait and see how this plays out.
Yeah, there's a question from Brad Wilson. He wants to understand fully, if one of these students are injured, as a company, should we report this to our work comp?
Yeah, if one of the students is injured, I would work with the sponsoring institution to get the claim reported to work comp as soon as you can. As Kurt mentioned, we have those claims that come in, and we recognize that it's a unique employment relationship because of a program like this, and we can reposition it after it's reported. So there's no harm in filing it as you would a typical work comp claim. But I think best practices would be, as you build out these programs and you go through the steps that have kind of been laid out here today, that you make sure you've thought through what happens if there's an injury at work, and you know how to connect the two and get us what we need, or whoever the carrier happens to be, get them what they need to get the work comp claim going as quickly as possible, so that we don't delay anybody's medical care.
But yeah, ultimately it is that cooperating institution, the educational institution, where that claim should reside under their workers' compensation policy.
Okay. And then Melissa Stark actually has a question as well. She says there's a difference between interns and apprentices. Internships are for a set and short period of time, and there is no expectation of being hired by the company. An apprentice is an employee of the company. They are hired and the expectation is that they will remain employed after the completion of the apprenticeship. It is actually used as a retention strategy for employers. Now here's her question. If they are employees, they would still be covered by the employer's liability and workers' comp, but also now has an added layer of protection by being covered by the schools. Is she thinking correct, or does this really move liability exclusively to the district state?
I would say because of that exclusive remedy language that's in this bill that Robert pointed out, it shifts it to the the sponsoring entity. So where before, if you're being paid, you could have made an argument, there's section 104 of the Workers' Comp Act, that this intern was actually an employee. There's now a defense, essentially defense to that. It says, no, for purposes of workers' comp, they were an employee of the sponsoring institution and therefore entitled only to workers' compensation medical benefits and not to lost time benefits. That's the piece that I think, because neither the Work Comp Act or the Occupational Disease Act were amended, that's the piece that theoretically could be challenged at some point downstream, and an injured worker who didn't like that they had no access to indemnity benefits could point out that conflict between the Work Comp Act and the sections of the act that are amended by this bill. We obviously haven't seen that yet, and that seems to me like it's far more likely to happen in the case of a severe injury. So one more reason to be as safe as you possibly can. But it's not a dual coverage situation. It's not where now there's an additional layer. It actually takes it and moves it. What theoretically could have been the hosting company's liability and puts it on the sponsoring entity.
Okay, perfect. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Can I just say, under the Apprenticeship Act, there's a clear section that was included in the bill that, just like JD just said, that for a youth apprentice, the school is liable, but for a general apprentice, and I assume an apprentice who's being paid, I don't see a similar provision. The provision that provides workers' comp and the risk management fund is only applicable to a youth apprentice and makes the public school responsible. I don't see a provision that would, in other words, I'd be asking the same question. I think the actual employer under an apprentice program, not with a youth, but just, I assume it's with an adult apprentice, their own workers' comp, they would be, we'll carry it. It won't go back to the school.
Yeah, that's a great point, that this bill only hits those youth apprenticeships as they are defined in Utah law.
But that's apprenticeship. That's the 144-hour adult apprenticeship that gives you a license, a certificate. But the internships under universities and schools and the youth apprenticeship, those are all covered, meaning that they're not using the employer's workers' comp. They're going to the universities or the schools' employers' comp.
Or medical benefits.
For medical benefits. Yeah, correct.
Anybody else have anything to add to that before we go? We have another question. No. Okay. Melissa says, thank you very much. That cleared it up for her very well. So she appreciates that. Brad Wilson has a question. What about OSHA recording?
Floyd, do you have insights?
Yeah, my camera's being weird, so sorry I can't see me. The recording requirements are the same for the apprentices. You would have to report any injury or accident within the 8-hour period that we already have established. In that regard, we don't make a separation between adults or minors.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, we are going to go ahead and move on to our next presenter. Thank you, Rainey and JD and Kurt. Appreciate all of your efforts and information here. Oh, we might have one more question before we move on. Let me double check. Oh, Brad just says thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, all right. Next, we're going to hear from Sandy Hammer. She's the CTE coordinator for Granite School District. And again, as mentioned earlier, she helped refine the language for HB 555. And so now that we're familiar with some of the policies and goals and logistics related to HB 555, we have Sandy, and then next we'll have Mike Hassler to kind of tell us how they're going to implement it. And Sandy's especially was involved in the HB 555, and she'll share her role and reasons why she felt it important for Utah students. So with that, Sandy, if you would like to go ahead and take it away. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, so I always preface my comments that as we talk about this, remember that each district may be slightly different. I'm going to talk to you about processes that we think are critical. I was involved in House Bill 555 because many of our students have been taking sequences of courses, and the internship apprenticeship for us are capstone. And many of the companies would say, well, we'd love to work with you, but we can't take someone under 18. And our goal is to connect students prior to the time they leave high school for a number of reasons. Research is pretty clear that if you don't, they're going to wander for about 5-10 years, and then they may look for a job. And we really want to make those connections prior to the time. And we work really hard in our training programs to come as close to industry requirements as we can for safety, for different things, so that the students are prepared when they walk onto a work site. With construction, I think we have the largest construction program in the state, and it's been running for about 40 years. So we really have been involved in apprenticeship in different ways with at least electrical and plumbing for some time. To kind of talk about House Bill 555, to me, it opened doors. What it did is, in the past, I had to be very cautious as I talked to companies because all the other bills said uncompensated. So as soon as you paid students, that liability, the workers' comp was on you. When they moved to districts, especially the workers' comp, again, part of that was for district people to have conversations with their district people so that they understood what was happening. So that's kind of outside of this, but really important step. When we work with companies, we do a number of things. One, we do a safety agreement with them that's required in law. And there are specific statements that have to be in that safety agreement. One is that you won't be alone with a student for significant amounts of unsupervised time. And I love the fact that they put intentionally alone. You won't be intentionally alone with a student for significant amounts of unsupervised time. For most laws, I have to tell you that they never define anything. And so what is significant amounts of time and what is intentional? And so as we look at that, that is something we talk about with companies. Some companies, we have to add an addendum, except in specific parts of training. So I'll give you an example. In the case of medical assistants who are working for their national license, they have to go into a patient room alone. And the first question the lawyers ask is, couldn't they just leave the door open? And my answer was, HIPAA violation, you can't do that. So again, sometimes we'll amend it, but in most cases, that's the statement. And my answer to you guys is just make sure they're with a couple of people, that you're not taking a student into a back room. The other piece we do is when a student enters a program, we have different forms. If a company requires a confidentiality form, we train the students on what confidentiality means, and we have them sign with their parents because they're minors, and that they understand that they have to hold the information confidential. We have an application process, and we also have a work agreement that includes the student, the parent, the company, and our work-based person who will supervise it, so that everybody knows their role. So we kind of have forms that we can talk students through. I liked the conversation regarding you need to train kids in specific aspects of going into an industry. We train on workers' comp. We train on what happens if you get hurt and who you call and how you call. In our agreements with companies, we ask companies to sign that they will help with the accident report because they're going to be the people who have seen it. And so we're very specific in requests of their help to fill out those accident reports, but those do go through our district. They do not go through the company. We also, as part of training, talk to kids about what it looks like to be harassed or and different kinds of things. And we talk about how they can be the harasser as well as someone else. So we really try to talk to them about what it looks, how do you, if something's happening, who is the first person you go to? And I have to be very, this is really important. And in fact, it's important because I got in trouble for it years and years ago. The students who are on the site need to have a supervisor, someone who is the person they talk to, and that could be a human resource person, it could be the person who's mentoring them, but they need to know the person they go to talk to if there's an issue. And if it's an issue with the student, a lot of companies try to fix our students. And I'm going to ask you please not to do it. If the kid's not showing up and you would fire another employee, you're going to fire our student. You're going to say, sorry, you're not part of this, whether it's unpaid or paid. You guys are so great in trying to just teach the kids, but letting them stay is not teaching them. So following your same protocols. We do a lot of work up front with companies, talking about what they're hoping to accomplish, what we're hoping to accomplish. That goes in the safety agreement. And whenever possible, we like to have a skills list. So you're checking off, but you're also telling us what they came to you missing. What skills are they missing? What could we have trained better so that they were better on your work site? And then you talked a lot about safety. Part of what we are responsible for is to check a work site for safety. Now, I have to tell you that if I worked on your work site or walked on your work site, I would have no clue if you are safe. I walked through an automotive dealership the other day and somebody said, well, was that the safety check? And I said, no, because I don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So in most cases, like in our construction, we employ 5 licensed contractors, 2 are in electrical plumbing, 3 are general contractors. More than likely, I would have those people look at your site. And I'm looking for safety in 2 ways. I'm looking for physical safety. I'm also looking for emotional safety. We were working with a specific company in construction, and as we watched and students would come back and talk, there was a lot of yelling, a lot of swearing, a lot of to all employees. And we actually closed that site for us because we're looking for positive environments where students can grow. And Melissa talked about the mentor. We're really looking at having positive mentors for students. We like the concept of apprenticeship, and the reason we like it, especially registered, is that 1-to-1, 1-to-2, where a student actually has a person who is helping them grow, helping them move forward. So we do have a walkthrough on sites. We also constantly look at safety. I joke a lot because my goal is that you have no accidents. I have been here way too long, about 40 years. And in all that time, I have had 4 accidents on an internship site. By the way, 3 have been in hospitals with sharps. The 4th was on a construction site. And that was a site the student should have never been on because the person was paying the student under the table. And when the student got hurt, they wanted me to take care of it. And I said, you're breaking the law. I can't help you. But so really those following the laws, keeping a safe site, our students versus people who come off the streets, our students so want to be successful that if you will work with them to tell them what they need to do, what we find is the students do it. And we're not going to give you a student that we haven't vetted to say, yes, we think they'll follow. So questions, we have a very specific process. We've been doing it a long time. As you work with your districts, you really need to work with them on their process. What are they doing?
Does anyone have any questions for Sandy? Give me a second. Let me see if I've got one here. No. Okay, thank you so much, Sandy, for your insight, and I love the process that you guys use for your students. That's awesome.
And let me add one last piece. A number of companies have called me about summers, about students who, especially in the apprenticeship, they were a senior, they started the apprenticeship, but they won't turn 18 until August because of our school year. In other programs, the state has agreed to let us carry that liability on insurance on them, like with our farm tech, where they can't test until they're 18. They've allowed us to. We are having those conversations with state risk management to see how it fits with this apprenticeship bill.
Perfect, wonderful, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to Mike Hassler, our final presenter. He's the work-based learning coordinator and workforce development with the Washington County School District. And Mike's going to give some practical applications to install these opportunities within local school districts. And as Sandy mentioned, each school district may be a little different. So with that, we'd like to welcome Mike. You there, Mike? There you are. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you for having me.
You bet.
Yeah, I just want to get started by first saying Sandy is the best. She's my hero, and I refused to speak before her because I didn't want to say anything wrong. And so she lays it down, and I come in and just kind of have fun. But last week I was in a business meeting with the university, the tech, and then 8 companies, and that was supposed to be a voice of the employers to kind of say this is what we're looking for. And what happened is the employers complained about kind of the pipeline coming their way, and then they put it onto the university. And then the university was like, well, it's not ours, it's the tech. And then the tech was like, oh no, it's the K through 12 system. And so it's interesting to kind of be a part of it where I'm at, where I'm the K through 12 system. And all we focus on is really just connecting talent to employers who want talent, and what can we do to make that work. And as we're in that meeting, I walked away just thinking like, there really needs to be some clarification on kind of how we're making things, come together. And so there's 3 things that I think that any school district and any employer should really consider before they dive in. Because the first thing we learned today was Rochelle and Melissa, they have absolutely removed so many barriers that are in the way, and they've clarified a lot of misunderstanding. Sandy also has just kind of showcased that we can make it work. Like, if this is something you guys want to do, let's make it work. But the 3 things that it's hard to find employers that kind of understand this next portion. And the first thing is, and I really just would love to challenge you guys just to kind of sit down. Like, if I'm in Alpine, and I know Tom would, like, do I know these answers to Lone Peak High School? And the first thing is we need to understand the motives of both sides involved. So it can become a win-win. The second thing is we have to ask ourselves what repeatable processes are in place so we can make this successful. So all the work that Melissa and Sandy and Rochelle have done, they don't work if at our level, at the LEA with our school districts, if we don't have a repeatable process in place. And then the third thing is we have to really start focusing on progressive partnerships. And that's a huge thing that I've learned over the last 6.5 years of doing this job, is that I used to just run to the first company. It's like, I want to hire. And I've realized that we've got to establish progressive partnerships to really start to vet the employers and also provide quality outcomes for the students as well. And so I want to dive in real fast on the very first one. And it's understanding the motives of both sides. And so I just pulled some numbers. So in our district alone, in November, we had 41,046 students in the system K through 12. That's a pretty good sized pipeline. And then just this May, we had 39,650. So we had a 1,396, student reduction because of early graduation, online school, private schools, homeschool, whatever it may be. Now, we are not immune, just like any industry, we're not immune to just, to the revenue going away and then still sustaining ourselves. So what happened is that 1396 students, that this is just our district alone. So think about this in Lone Peak and statewide, you know, across the way. That's 51 periods that our district lost income for. And so that 51 periods, if you break it down by how many staff to students or teachers to students there should be to have like a full schedule, basically almost 9 teachers, we just lost the income in terms of reimbursements for next year. And so for any employer that's kind of listening to this, I would ask you to kind of walk into your place of business and be like, look at 9 employees and be like, we are not making any money for you guys. You guys are costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what would be your response to that? And so that right there, that creates a distrust sometimes with the teachers, with us as we're recruiting for industry, because they're like, Mike, I'm trying to keep my job. And so my job is to then pitch to them. I understand. But look, if we can create good outcomes for the employers, then the students will see that, and then they'll take your classes. Like, we can fill this, we can backfill it. It's not something that we can fix overnight, but it's an issue that we have to face, and we're willing to do it for you guys. But we have to face that, and that kind of makes people question the motives of what are we doing and why are we doing it. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind is if you don't have kind of like a template, like in your place of business as to what is, do I feel comfortable with the motives with the districts I work with, then that's definitely the very first place that we should start. So it's a win-win for all parties involved. The second thing is that repeatable process in place. The thing that I remember thinking 6.5 years ago, hey, when I get 500 companies, I'm going to have this thing dialed in. And well, I've built my program to 702. So I work with 702 companies, and no semester is the same with industry because of turnover. And so the point of contact that I set something up with and I start recruiting, and I'm going through all these barriers, I finally get students in place. And then all of a sudden I call the company and they're like, oh, well, that person no longer works here. And we've just kind of pressed pause on what we were doing. And that immediately puts a stop in that repeatable process in place. And again, that's just, it's a tough thing to balance. It's not something that we can't overcome. We can. But again, we have to have that plan with the LEAs, which is local educational agencies, and our employers that we work with. And then of course the A/B schedule. And this is something that I don't think really industry thinks a lot about, but it kind of gives them false hope when they're recruiting in the schools. They'll come in on like an A day and they'll present to a bunch of students and they think, I've done my job. What they don't realize is on B day, there's a whole new set of students that had no idea what just happened the day before. And so kind of helping employers be able to have a more balanced approach with what we're doing at the LEA level is something that we try to focus on to make sure that the employers are getting, just casting a wider net and being able to catch more opportunities with the local talent that's kind of coming up through the pipelines. And then of course, the A/B schedules, and then I can't even read my own handwriting, but just a sense of security. And that's what happens with I don't feel secure sometimes with companies that have a lot of turnover. When employers come in and present like an A day in one class period, all of a sudden they think that they have a sense of security because they went and presented. It's false. It's absolutely false. And it's not something that we talk about enough when we're collaborating. And so the HB 555 policy, I think, is fantastic, because now that we know those barriers have kind of been, really taken care of, what do we do now? And so that's something that we want to think about. The other thing that we have to think about too on our end, in terms of going back to the whole, you got to keep the money coming in to keep the doors open. When we do internships to help, and we send a student to a company and the company hires them, or even just keeps them on, our policy states that we can't receive reimbursement if the student stays at the company as an intern for 2 semesters. So they can stay there, but our district can't receive any income off of that. And so we are more than happy to help. But again, that goes back to just a repeatable process, the barriers, the motives that we're kind of talking about. And so that's something that really employers don't recognize too much, is that, yes, we can give them credit, but in terms of being able to keep the doors open, I myself, Used to have like 4 people working for me. I'm down to a 0.5. I'm down to a half a person, because just when the money is not there, then what do you do? And so we do everything we can to help, and our program has grown. We've made a lot of good, but again, there's barriers that we face. And so it goes back to just the whole motives and the win-win, let's work together type of thing. Which is why I've kind of installed that third piece, which is the progressive partnerships. I'm sure if you've been in the education system long, you have a bigger perspective than I do. But just in the last 6.5 years that I've been doing this particular job with the school district, we've taken this program to new heights. We went from 10 companies to 702, but we've learned a lot. So right now I'm looking at my system. I've got 280 students who want to go into construction. I know exactly who they are, their parents, the kids, everything. And those are grades 9 through 12 right now. I've got, let's see, what was it right here? Transportation for mechanics. I've got 219. I know exactly who they are, grades 8 through 12. Landscaping, I've got 309. Those will be a great audience. And these are kids that have identified saying, I want this. When I work with companies, they often will say, well, I want the low-hanging fruit. And I'm thinking, I get what you're saying, but I've got a 5-year pipeline. We know exactly who they are, but all of a sudden they just look at me like, nah, this isn't worth my time. And it goes back to the motives. So how can we make that work? I have names, but I don't have employers to give them to, because the employers really, we don't kind of have that system built up throughout the process, because of, in a lot of cases, it's just the point of contacts changing within the companies, which then changes kind of the direction that they're going. And so what we've done to kind of just be able to grab a collection of names is just a simple Google form. We had to go to the board to get approval, but we know we have 1,121 students who have filled out this form, who have given us permission to recruit them directly, and their parents have, for this very thing that we're talking about today. But then can I turn around? Do I have that many companies who are willing to kind of play the long game and do the 5-year process with me? And so for me, I start out with hiring fairs, career fairs, guest speakers, right? You find something, you kind of figure out who's going to put some sweat equity into the next generation. And then as that happens, we start to kind of build a relationship of trust with those employers. We progress the partnership. And then we just start opening up the names. And so that's something that we're doing here. But again, I'm just lucky that everyone before me kind of removed all those barriers that we were talking about. But I couldn't imagine, if I was an employer, not knowing my district's motives, the repeatable process that we have in place, and of course, how can we develop a progressive partnership? So that was a lot of info, but I just wanted to throw it out there in the remaining time we had left. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. Great points. And Sandy wanted to reiterate a point that Mike did make, and that was about if a student has left high school or is on homework or release, they are not covered by HB 555. Students need to be registered in an internship or apprenticeship for the coverage. So just wanted to reiterate that important point. So thank you for bringing that up. And then we've got 2 questions. First one is for Sandy from Brad. Are you teaching them the basics of work ethic, dependability, being on time, etc.? That is for you, Sandy, and or Mike.
So the answer is yes. In fact, for our district in particular, we have actually instituted a new kind of citizenship at work process that students start in kindergarten. And every single year they're rated on 5 criteria or 6: dependability, respect, responsibility, things that our industry partners help us refine with the district group. And those, every single quarter, the kids get reviewed on those. How are you doing? Then in every single CTE class, those standards for work skills are also a part of those CTE classes, and the teachers are supposed to be reinforcing them. So in one case, a math teacher, a science teacher, all of those teachers are supposed to be reinforcing those skills. But for every district in the state, if they're taking a CTE course, the teacher is supposed to be reinforcing the skills you're being asked about as a piece. And with that, when companies come in and say to our teachers, do you have kids you can refer? we refer the kids who have both sides of the skills. I had a company last year say to me, I just need a body. And I said, I'm sorry, but we only refer the kids that we think will be a positive asset to your company. So the students know that for that referral from the teacher, they have to have those skills.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sandy. And then there's just a comment that there's a very lax mentality about being on time and dependable. And I'm sure those types of things are covered in your training. I know when I've sat in on trainings with Mike, that type of thing is covered. Is that true, Sandy and Mike? Okay. All right.
I would say yes. In fact, we try to do what our industry partners say, and our industry partners in construction tell us that on time is 15 minutes early, that they're there, they have their tool belts on, that they're on the work site ready to work. And so we have advisory boards, and we work with those advisory boards to tell us what we should be saying.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I put on a lot of trainings here at the AGC office, and they're mostly here 15 to 30 minutes early. So sometimes before our staff. So that's a good quality to have. All right, we want to thank everyone. Our time is up. I appreciate everyone who has been here to speak to us, Mike and Sandy and Rainey, JD, Kurt, Robert, Floyd, and Rochelle. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you all of our attendees that came on today. Had a great group listening in, and we will be emailing out the recorded version as well as all the resources that was provided today. So thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
See ya.